In my previous life, I fulfilled the marriage contract and married the deposed crown prince. I accompanied him to exile at the border, enduring hunger and cold for a full 8 years, which ruined my health. Yet, after he returned to the capital and ascended the throne, he used my years of childlessness as an excuse to cast me, gravely ill, into the cold palace. He watched me die of illness with his own eyes but forbade anyone from helping me, simply because I had seen him at his most wretched, and he feared I would reveal it. After my rebirth, I decisively begged my aunt the Empress to help me break off the engagement and sever all ties with him. He probably doesn't know that in my previous life, the reason he was able to return to the capital was because I wrote letters daily begging my aunt the Empress and my maternal family to mediate on his behalf. But in this life, not only will I watch him fall into the mire with my own eyes, I'll also stomp on him hard a few times. The day the deposed crown prince was escorted out of the capital, he unexpectedly encountered my carriage as I was leaving on a journey. Overjoyed, he stopped the carriage. "Atong, I knew you couldn't bear to part with me. Are you leaving the capital to follow me?" I ignored him and let the servants kick him away. Living a second life, I don't want to depend on men anymore. I plan to go south to do business and carve out my own path. Later, when he was summoned back to the capital, he was hunched over with a head full of white hair and riddled with illness. Without my years of attentive care, he was no longer as spirited as before. The emperor found him useless and an eyesore, and demoted him to commoner status again. When he was wandering the streets begging, I had already become the wealthiest woman in Jiangnan. "Miss, the crown prince has been deposed by his majesty," the maid Chunman said breathlessly as she hurried into the room. "I know." I responded indifferently, then continued to apply my eyebrows and groom myself in front of the mirror. Looking at my 16-year-old face in the mirror, I momentarily had the illusion of living in a beautiful dream. In my previous life, for the sake of the deposed crown prince Liu Yang, I ignored my parents' and aunt's advice and insisted on fulfilling the marriage contract. I gave up a promising future and comfortable life to follow him into exile at the bitter cold borderlands. That place was nothing but white. As far as the eye could see, no verdant willows, no warm and comfortable weather, just the cold wind howling all day long. And because I married the deposed crown prince, I went from being a proper noble young lady to the wife of a deposed crown prince. Implicated by him even on the coldest days, all I had was a worn-out, tattered cotton jacket to keep warm. Those delicate, slender hands also became covered with chilblains from day after day of toil. But that wasn't the worst part, because I held hope in my heart that Liu Yang would one day be vindicated and return to the capital. I saved up some money to write letters to my family and to the imperial concubine in the palace, hoping they could find ways to intercede for Liu Yang so we could return to the capital sooner. But after 8 years of bitter waiting, when Liu Yang's crime of treason was overturned, and he was brought back to the capital to inherit the throne, the first thing he did was not to make me, his wife who had accompanied him for 8 years, the Empress. Instead, he divorced me on the grounds that I had borne him, no children for many years, threw me into the cold palace, and left me, seriously ill, to die miserably there without proper care or treatment, simply because I had seen him at his most wretched, and he feared I would reveal it. After my death, fearing that my aunt, who had become the Empress Dowager, would blame him, he gave her a drug to make her mute and sent her to a Taoist temple outside the city, forcing her to practice there and never allowing her to return to the palace. And my father and brother, seeking justice for me, died by crashing into pillars in the Great Hall. Liu Yang didn't have anyone stop them, only saying that it was actually quite peaceful now that they were all dead. My mother, upon learning of this, also died of grief not long after. And now everything has returned to the beginning. He is now mud on the ground, while I am still a swallow in the sky, the legitimate daughter of the Liu family. In this second life, I will not only watch him reach a dead end with my own eyes, but I will also kick him when he is down. "Daughter, your aunt just sent someone with a letter saying she respects your wishes. If you insist on following through with the marriage contract and marrying the deposed crown prince, she will risk offending his majesty to plead for the deposed crown prince. trying to get him exempted from hard labor so he can have a slightly easier time at the border. But if that happens and you marry him, you'll definitely have to go with him to the border to suffer. If you want to break off the engagement, your aunt will bring up the matter of breaking off the engagement before His Majesty on your behalf. With your aunt there, you can still marry whoever you want among all the men in this capital, and you won't have to worry about the broken engagement affecting your marriage prospects. As soon as my mother saw me, she immediately grabbed my hand and started talking on and on. In my previous life, I felt that one shouldn't kick someone when they're down. And besides, I had been engaged to Liu Yang for 3 years already. We had childhood sweethearts affection. So in my previous life, I was willing to overcome all obstacles and marry him, despite my family's advice, joining hands with him to accompany him through his most difficult days. Because of this, I implicated my aunt and my maternal family, and I was constantly suspected and feared by the emperor due to my marriage connection with Liu Yang. I did everything for him. But how did he repay me? First he divorced me and threw me into the cold palace. Then he poisoned my Aunt Mute and killed my entire family. Father, Mother, I don't want to go to that bitter cold place. I want to break off the engagement. Living a second life. There is no way I would choose to marry Liu Yang again. You're sure? No regrets? My father was overjoyed. He had originally seen that my feelings for Liu Yang ran quite deep, and thought I would be devoted to Liu Yang to the bitter end because of this. He knew too well that I had valued relationships and loyalty since childhood, and that I would definitely do what I said I would do. He had even prepared himself for me, insisting on marrying the deposed crown prince, but he never expected that I would actually take the initiative to propose breaking off the engagement. Atong, if you've made up your mind, Mother will enter the palace immediately to report to the Empress and have her decide to cancel this engagement for you. But once decided, there is no turning back once the arrow is released. You must think it through clearly. My mother thought it over and over, still worried that I was just acting on impulse and must still have feelings for Liu Yang in my heart. So even though she very much wanted to cancel this marriage for me, she wasn't in a rush. Whether it was father and mother or aunt, they all greatly respected my wishes. I knew this in my previous life, and it warmed my heart. I'm certain I've thought it through. Although I have some feelings for him, now that he has fallen to such a state, if I still choose to marry him, I'd be dragging the whole family down with me. People climb to higher ground, water flows to lower ground. I'm determined to cancel this engagement. In my previous life, because I chose to marry him, Aunt and my parents suffered greatly on my account. As long as you've thought it through, I'll enter the palace right now to see the Empress. Seeing that I insisted on canceling the engagement, my mother immediately went to the palace to see Empress Aunt. About 3/4 of an hour later, she hurried back. How did it go? I quickly went up to meet her. When I went to see your aunt, His Majesty was also there. Upon hearing that you wanted to cancel the engagement, His Majesty said it was understandable. Shortly, a eunuch will come to the house to announce that the engagement between you and the deposed crown prince is void. Thinking that I wouldn't have to accompany the deposed crown prince to that bitter, cold land because of this, my mother felt this trip was very worthwhile. Don't marry the deposed crown prince. What your aunt means is that you can pick one from the remaining princes, and she'll act as matchmaker and pull strings for you. Even if you don't become the crown princess in the future, you'll still be a noble princess consort. You can take advantage of this time to carefully choose. Late at night, after all the maidservants had withdrawn, my mother and I lay on the same bed as she spoke candidly with me. Mother, I won't marry a prince. Once you enter the palace gates, it is as deep as the sea. If I marry a prince, I'll be forever trapped in that whirlpool. Regardless of whether the prince I marry becomes emperor or not, at the very least, I'll have to take sides. The victor becomes king, the loser a bandit, one misstep and our entire family could be implicated too. I don't want to marry yet. I want to do business. I'm not someone with lofty ambitions, and I'm not very interested in the Empress's throne. Compared to the Empress's throne, I'd rather have the whole family safe and sound before. I hoped for marital harmony, Now I hope for freedom and prosperity. In this life, I've thought it through very clearly. Rather than marrying a prince and dragging the whole family into the struggle for the throne, ultimately ending up with husband and wife turning against each other and family members walking on thin ice, it is better to venture out freely under the vast sky and wide sea. In my previous life, I depended on Liu Yang, although I walked a long road with him and went to distant places because of my status. I was always confined to the small space around him. Of those magnificent rivers and mountains, in the end I only remembered the hardships of the journey and the vast white snow of the borderlands. In that lifetime, I lived for Liu Yang, lived to get him back to the capital, lived to reunite with my family, but never once lived for myself. Now that I've calmed down and thought it over, in this life, I want to live well for myself, just once, not dependent on a man. Just live well for myself once. To see those magnificent rivers and mountains, to taste the world's delicacies, to see the local customs and cultures everywhere, to do business, to earn myself a future with my own hands, how wonderful that would be. That way my father and brother would only need to be loyal subjects, without having to worry day and night about how to pave the way for me, because of whoever I married. Doing business? That is so hard. My mother was a bit hesitant at first after hearing this. Mother, I'm not afraid of hardship. Back then, didn't my grandfather also accumulate his wealth bit by bit through business? I want to be like him, traveling around and seeing the world, then working hard to become my own pillar of support. Besides, with you all here, even if I suffer losses out there, I won't be afraid. I'll still have a place to shelter from the wind and rain when I come back. I snuggled in her arms and wheedled. All right then, everyone has their own destiny. I respect your choice. After thinking it over, my mother sighed, thinking that no matter what, it was still much better than marrying the Fei Taizi. She didn't care whether I could become the mother of the nation like Aunt the Empress in this lifetime. She only cared about whether I was happy or not. Since I had no interest in power, she wouldn't force me. Since I wanted to do business, then I'd do business. She would have my father assign more people to protect me along the way. Why do you want to break off our engagement? We're childhood sweethearts who grew up together. I don't believe you're the type who tramples on the down and kowtows to the up. At the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet, I was invited to attend. While admiring flowers in the imperial garden, I unexpectedly ran into the deposed Crown Prince Liu Yang. He must have snuck out. At this moment, he kept looking left and right, afraid of being seen, yet his eyes were fixed firmly on me. Bloodshot. That is right. I'm not someone who tramples on the down and kowtows to the up, but you are. Your type can only share hardships, not wealth and glory. If I were the one being exiled today, would your highness continue with our engagement? Meeting his incredulous gaze, I asked calmly, already knowing the answer in my heart. Of course I would share both sweet and bitter with you. How could you betray me? He wore an expression of deep hurt, as if I were some unforgivable, heartless scoundrel. Your highness's idea of sharing sweet and bitter is secretly contacting the Marquis of Shanghai, promising that if you could be reinstated one day, you'd divorce me and make his daughter the crown princess? I mercilessly exposed his lies. In my previous life, I only learned of this after falling gravely ill. Turns out before marrying me, he'd already prepared to sacrifice me to pave his way. This hypocrite of the highest order truly made me sick. How did you know? This secret letter, aside from his trusted confidants, no one else had been told. He looked around frantically, and seeing no one else in the garden, instinctively reached out to strangle my neck, because only the dead can keep secrets. Fortunately, I reacted quickly. Ever since I saw him, I'd been carefully on guard. When he raised his hand to strangle me and got very close, I suddenly jerked my head up and rammed it hard into his chin, smashing his mouth bloody and even knocking out one of his teeth. You dare to ambush me? When Liu Yang raised his head again, the gloom in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. He raised his hand to strangle me again, but I quickly tilted my head to dodge. You still dare call yourself me? You're no longer the crown prince, Commoner Liu. As I spoke, I grabbed a pot of jasmine from the side, raised it and smashed it hard at him, then quickly ran away. He wouldn't dare make a scene after all. A deposed crown prince leaving his residence without permission was a grave offense. When I returned to the banquet out of breath, preparing to go home with mother, suddenly another incident occurred. The seventh prince, whom I'd barely met, suddenly stepped forward saying he had feelings for me and wanted to ask the Emperor and Empress Dowager to grant us a marriage. I hurriedly looked up and met eyes with Aunt Empress. She shook her head slightly, indicating this wasn't her arrangement, which put my mind at ease somewhat. Fortunately, the Emperor wasn't confused. After looking around, he asked for my thoughts. Atong, I've watched you grow up too. The seventh prince says he has feelings for you. Are you willing? I hurriedly knelt down and answered solemnly. This subject just broke off the engagement with the deposed crown prince. If I marry the seventh prince right now, it would be bad for his reputation. Moreover, this subject has plans to go south for business and doesn't know when I'll be able to return, so I'm really not the best candidate to be the seventh prince's consort. After hearing this, the emperor not only didn't blame me but was very satisfied with my answer. I'm the daughter of an important official, and also the empress's own niece. The empress has no children, so if I were to marry a prince, it would relate to which side the empress's maternal family supports. As the new crown prince candidate, it concerns the matter of establishing an heir. Moreover, I just broke off my engagement with the deposed crown prince and declined the marriage with the seventh prince. When I return from doing business down south later, I'll probably already be past the best age for marriage and won't possibly become a prince's consort anymore. If I don't marry into the imperial family, it means the empress and her maternal family behind her won't interfere in the matter of establishing an heir, and my father and brother will forever remain loyal and pure subjects. After hearing this, the emperor waved his hand. If that is the case, then I won't decree this marriage. You may all withdraw. As I knelt to express my gratitude, I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, I don't have to marry into the imperial family. From now on, the sky is high and the sea is wide for me to fly freely. That night, the deposed crown prince sent someone to deliver a letter. He wrote, "You're not marrying the seventh prince. Is it because you still have feelings for me in your heart? If you change your mind now and continue to fulfill your marriage contract with me, when I'm exiled, I can let you stay by my side to care for and attend to me in the status of a concubine. He wants me, a respectable young lady from a good family, to become his concubine and accompany him into exile. I even called off the engagement, yet he only thought I was throwing a tantrum. How could he be so shameless? When my parents saw that letter, they were so angry they wanted to confront him several times. My brother hasn't returned from the military camp yet. If he knew Liu Yang was humiliating me like this, he'd definitely be furious too. Does he think he is the only man in the world worth marrying?" My father angrily smashed his teacup. "Does he think women only have marriage as their one option, daughter? You're right. Mother supports you going into business and staying far away from that Liu Yang." My mother's hands trembled as she held mine. In her eyes, the fact that I'd come to my senses and called off the engagement was like escaping death, that Liu Yang really was a complete scumbag. With my family's support, I began preparing at home for my merchant journey to Jiangnan. Since women can't always wear women's clothing when traveling, I had many sets of men's clothes custom made. I also selected several guards from the household to accompany me. Not knowing what business to do, I didn't bring any goods, just a few chests of capital, planning to figure things out as I went. On the day of departure, the weather was clear. Though my parents and aunt were reluctant to part with me, they still wiped their tears and saw me off to the city gate. "Take care on your journey and remember to write home when you reach Jiangnan to let us know you're safe." With reddened eyes, I nodded and climbed into the carriage. Our group left the city. Unexpectedly, just after leaving the city, I heard someone shouting outside the carriage. "That is the Marquis Manor's carriage. and sitting outside is Atang's maidservant. I knew she couldn't bear to leave me. After a bout of shouting, the carriage was stopped at the city gate. I lifted half the curtain to see that it was the deposed crown prince Liu Yang who had stopped the carriage. He was currently being escorted under guard, with shackles on his legs, and his clothes had been changed to coarse hemp garments. To stop the carriage, he had exerted great effort and nearly fell to the ground. Upon seeing my face, his expression lit up with joy. Atang, I knew you couldn't bear to part with me. Are you going to follow me out of the capital? Atang, do you have any money on you? Could you hire a carriage for me? Walking to the frontier is too exhausting. As he spoke, he was about to step forward and lift the carriage curtain. I paid him no mind, only coldly giving an impatient look to the accompanying servant. You, a commoner being exiled to the frontier, dare to approach my young lady. Get lost, get lost, get lost. The servant understood my meaning, and without mercy kicked him away. Liu Yang hadn't anticipated this turn of events and fell flat on his face. Seeing him sprawled out in all directions, I said nothing more and lowered the curtain. Soon Liu Yang was driven away, and the coachman drove the carriage off at full speed. From this day forward, Liu Yang and I would go our separate ways, one heading south, one heading north. Barring any accidents, we would never meet again. In this lifetime, without my assistance, he would surely suffer many hardships, and whether he'd even have a chance to return to the capital remained uncertain. Just thinking about how in every day from now on, I'll still be wearing silk and satin, eating delicacies from land and sea, while Liu Yang has to endure day after day of exile, unable to eat his fill or stay warm, fills my heart with great satisfaction. The most gratifying part is this karmic cycle. In her previous life, the female lead accompanied Liu Yang through 8 years of exile, enduring cold and hunger, ruining her health, only to be thrown into the cold palace with her entire family dying miserably. In this life, the female lead decisively withdrew, leaving him there to fend for himself, while she took her capital south to do business. Without the female lead's care and her maternal family's intervention, Liu Yang can only struggle in the bitter, cold frontier. Just thinking about how the female lead's future days will be full of wealth and honor, free and easy, while Liu Yang has to endure hunger and cold day after day. After 2 months of travel, I finally arrived at my maternal grandfather's home in Jiangnan. When my grandfather heard I wanted to do business, he was very happy. He didn't understand other things, but this he could teach me hands-on. Over the next half year, he not only hired teachers to teach me how to read account books and distinguish the quality of goods, but also took me to meet his major clients from past business dealings whenever he found an opportunity. Gradually, I opened my first shop since coming to Jiangnan, an exquisite pastry shop that specialized in serving female customers. Unmarried young ladies could also rest their feet here after visiting friends, without fear of running into men from outside their family, making it more comfortable. The pastries were delicious, the place was elegant, and over time, it gained fame. Female customers came in an endless stream to eat the pastries. Then the shop opened one after another, not only in the Jiangnan small towns near my maternal grandmother's home, but in many prosperous places. My pastry shops opened up. The shops no longer only had pastries, but also tea, music performances, and poetry composition. Going out for tea was originally a man's pleasure, but now women could also go out for tea without being disturbed by men. Gradually, it became a trend. In the surrounding prefectures and counties, women's tea houses opened up one after another, followed by women's theaters and women's academies. 8 years later, women going out to drink tea and watch plays had become a common thing, and I, by virtue of this initiative, made a fortune and even became the richest person in Jiangnan at one point. Now when people mention me, I'm no longer the young lady from the marquise's mansion who broke off her engagement with the deposed crown prince, but Merchant Zhang, the wealthy businesswoman of Jiangnan. Most men would sigh, what is the use of her being so good at making money? She is already in her 20s and still hasn't married. She has become an old maid. When women mention me, their faces are full of envy. Merchant Jiang is truly amazing. Without relying on a husband, she established her own business and carved out her own world. Who says women are naturally meant to be controlled by their husbands in every way? Merchant Jiang's way is also very good. Because of my emergence, many women like me walked out of their household gates to do business, to study at academies, to do the things they had always wanted to do, but couldn't because they were confined to the inner chambers. They earn their own money and spend it themselves. Don't need to depend on men, and can live very well. They're not wives who must bear sons for their husbands' families, or else be despised. Nor are they concubines who can be sold off at will. They are first and foremost themselves. Since my mother wrote recently saying she really missed me, and hearing that the deposed crown prince was about to return to the capital, I decided to go back to see her, keep her company, and also watch Liu Yang's drama unfold. The journey from Jiangnan back to the capital took 2 months, same as it did back then. But the difference was that when I left years ago, my heart was full of expectations and confusion about the future. Now coming back, flush with cash, my heart and eyes were full of anticipation for seeing my family soon, and watching Liu Yang make a fool of himself. So the days spent on the road didn't feel so hard to endure. Account books sent to the carriage along the way piled up like mountains, and before I could finish reading them, we'd already arrived at the bustling capital. After seeing my parents and brother, and playing with my little nephew for a while, exhausted from the journey, I finally returned to my own courtyard. Even though I'd been gone so long, the courtyard still looked exactly as it did when I left, with all the same things inside that I'd grown accustomed to using 5 years ago. It looked especially familiar. While bathing, I leaned back in the warm, moist tub, and couldn't wait to ask about Liu Yang. I heard he is back in the capital too. Has he suffered any hardships these past years? The one answering was Mama Liu from my mother's courtyard, who was best at gathering information. Knowing about my old grievances with Liu Yang, she immediately opened up. Miss, the madam knew you cared about this matter, so she had this old servant go find out early this morning. That commoner Liu returned to the capital 3 days ago. Now that His Majesty is gravely ill, although he summoned him back, he is still somewhat hesitant, and has been leaving him in a remote palace, not moving him back to the main palace. The Marquise of Shanghai, who originally helped smooth things over for him and got him back to the capital, had planned to marry his youngest daughter to him, but now has changed his tune and is taking a wait-and-see approach. Has he taken a wife or had children over these years? In my previous life, because of the harsh cold at the border, my health was ruined, and I didn't bear him a son or daughter. He had resented me quite a bit for that. I wonder if in this life, without my involvement, his fate has changed. No. I heard that after Commoner Liu got to the border, he could only live in a thatched hut. Every day he not only had to do hard labor, but also couldn't eat his fill, and he contracted all sorts of illnesses. What woman would be willing to marry him? So he hasn't married and has no children. I was instantly delighted. Not only that, the place was bitterly cold. I heard he even got his body ruined by the freezing cold, and it is impossible for him to have children of his own in this life. After returning to the capital, he has been sickly all along and has never gotten better. Mama Liu said to me with schadenfreude, everyone knows that a prince whose body has been ruined by the cold, and who can't possibly have heirs, basically has no chance of ascending to the position of crown prince. Even if he returned to the capital, he can never make a comeback. In my past life, I covered him with the only 2 cotton quilts we had as much as possible, and gave him whatever we had to keep warm, which prevented his body from being ruined by the cold. In this life, without me sacrificing for him, it is finally his turn to have his body ruined by the cold. This is karmic retribution. The female lead's clear-headedness is the best part. No longer being a love-brained fool who does self-moving sacrifices, but instead, watching him suffer the consequences. You abandoned me like worn-out shoes back then, thinking that my having seen your wretched state was a hidden danger. Now without me, you can't even protect your own body, and you've lost even the capital to make a comeback. This kind of relief of, I once shielded you from wind and rain, now I watch you get drenched and frozen, is more powerful than any hysterical revenge. Is there anyone like me who can't help but applaud when seeing these 4 words karmic retribution? Over the next few days, I occasionally went out to visit friends, but spent most of my time at home with family. After all, there are many matters on the Jiangnan side, and in a few more days, I'll have to return to Jiangnan. The next time I come back will probably be around New Year's. I thought I would never encounter Liu Yang again in this life, even if the emperor chose to let him return to the palace. I was far away in Jiangnan, and would never see him again in this lifetime. However, that day, before I even left the house, I heard the maidservants in the residence saying, that deposed crown prince somehow displeased his majesty again, and was driven out of the palace once more. He is penniless, and has nowhere to stay. I heard he is now begging on the streets. I suddenly became interested. He is living so miserably, I need to go take a look. Father and mother didn't try to dissuade me from going, because they understood better than anyone that I was completely clear-headed now, and couldn't possibly reconcile with Liu Yang. If I wanted to take a look, then go ahead. When the sedan chair was carried to a street corner, Chunman suddenly called to stop. I lifted the curtain and looked outside. Not far away, that beggar sitting on the ground, all skin and bones and shivering from the cold, seemed to be none other than Liu Yang right now. Compared to this moment in my previous life, he looked much more wretched. Seeing him living like this put my mind at ease. The pent-up resentment and hatred in my heart over the years was gradually dissipating. Let's go back. I waved my hand. It was too cold outside. It was more comfortable to go home, hold a hand warmer, and lie in silk quilts. Atang, is that you? Don't go, please help me. I know I was wrong. When Liu Yang saw me sitting in the sedan chair, afraid I would leave, he cast aside his dignity. He grabbed the sedan bearer's leg, preventing him from carrying me away. He had so much he wanted to say to me. Speak then. When you're done, hurry up and let go. I lifted the curtain again, wanting to hear what else he had to say, but I also signaled to those beside me not to let Liu Yang get close to me. I found him filthy and foul-smelling. Atang, please help me. Come back to my side, won't you? It wasn't like this in the last life. I was supposed to become emperor. As long as you help me, this time I'll make you empress. He looked at me anxiously, making promises. It seems he was also reborn. Although I don't know whether he was reborn early or late, none of that matters. What matters is that he who ascended to the throne in his previous life can now only kneel before me like a stray dog, wagging his tail and begging for my favor. How miserable he must feel inside. Become emperor. Liu the commoner must have lost his mind. If his majesty hears such words, it is a beheading offense. Liu the commoner better not spout such nonsense again. Just stick to being your beggar. After saying this, I signaled the servants to drag him away, then lowered the curtain and left without looking back. Seeing that I wasn't softening at all, Liu Yang suddenly seemed to have all the strength drained from his body and collapsed lifelessly to the ground. I was his last hope, and now I had personally rejected him. He felt he had no reason to live anymore. That night, Liu Yang threw himself into a well and died. The authorities hastily collected his body, tossed it into the mass grave outside the city, leaving it for wild dogs to feed on his corpse. The emperor of a generation from the previous life just died like that. Died completely. And I, busy with business, soon set off to return to my Jiangnan, continuing to be my wealthy Jiangnan merchant, living my carefree life. After the female lead becomes the wealthiest woman in Jiangnan, what life trajectory is she most likely to choose next? A. Continue expanding business territory, opening up overseas trade routes. B. Establish a women's merchant association, fully promoting women's rights. C. Hand over the business to trusted subordinates. Travel the rivers and mountains. Enjoy a free life.